Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show, a roughly 1 hour, unscripted, interactive, conversational Bible study between a group of genuine misfits transformed by God's amazing grace. My name is Zach Adams. I'm a Christ follower, husband of one, father of three, diehard Atlanta Braves fan, world champs. I'm incredibly blessed to pastor a local church called Calvary 316. It's the greatest church around. If you'd like to learn more about the church, we're located just outside of Athens, Georgia. Just visit calvary316.com. As always, I'm joined in the studio by the man that needs no introduction, the maestro behind the madness, the producer of this dysfunction, my partner in crime, Creighton Vaughn. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a joy. Hey, y'all.
So since the last time we were doing this, so we took last week off because it was World Series. We were all in a World Series hangover, a lull, so to speak. And but since then, you have changed your look really since the last time we were on air quite a bit. You got rid of the beard, you went high and tight, and you were rocking like a 1920s villain mustache.
Yeah, I'm going with a Dick Dastardly look tonight.
A Dick Dastardly.
Yeah, that's the that's the goal.
That's the goal. So you got to get some wax to kind of roll that baby out.
Yes, absolutely.
Has your mother actually seen this look?
No, she is not. My mom hasn't, but my dad will on Saturday. I'm going to see him on Saturday.
Your dad will. Yeah. I'm not worried about your dad's reaction in any way. I'm more concerned about how your mom will react to it. But
it'll be interesting.
So explain to the audience how they can interact with the show in real time.
We are live on both Facebook and Twitter. Not Twitter. Facebook and YouTube. I don't know why I said Twitter. Whatever. It's the mustache. So we're live on both Facebook and YouTube. They have comment sections on the right-hand side of the video. If you have questions, comments, concerns, want to compliment me on my beautiful mustache, you can type those in there, and I am in the live chat. So I will see them. If it is a comment pertinent to the conversation at hand, or if it's something about my mustache that's positive, I will share it on the air. So yeah,
you're the gatekeeper, 100%. Yes. We are also joined in studio tonight by two of our brothers. As always, Deal Daddy Derek Kennedy.
We are here.
And Justin Holcomb, who's been with us before and is going to be more of a regular coming up.
I need a cool nickname.
You need a cool nickname.
Yeah. I feel a little left out. I don't know what it would be.
Okay, by the end of the show, Derek, you've got to do a little brainstorming and come up with some options.
Yeah, I'm spinning right now.
Yeah,
just like J Holcomb, J Joker. Something. I don't know.
Okay,
we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Like you're not good at freestyling off the top of your head.
No, not nicknames.
That was terrible. So we're gonna give you the whole episode. So you got the whole hour to think through a few nickname options. We won't commit to anything. Nick, who is typically with us, is under the weather today, and so Nick, we wish you the best. Hope you get feeling better. Hope you're back with us next week.
It's Justin Unchained.
Justin, you got to keep these to yourself until.
Yeah,
until the end. Wonder. Now, I will say, Justin, as always, you're going to have to project. You got to be loud.
With an overbearing presence of a man my size, you have to calm down a little bit so people aren't so afraid. So
big stick, soft voice.
Yeah,
we need big personality. I will say, like
big stick. Yeah,
I will say, leading into tonight's episode, these guys were out of control, and if they bring the same energy tonight will be very interesting to say the least. If you are new to the Outlaw Radio Show, and again, we've last couple weeks things have kind of been thrown a bit for a loop. We are Atlanta Braves fans, and so for 2 Wednesdays, they had games at 8:00, and so we bumped things up to 7. And then, like I mentioned last week with the World Series, we just took the week off. We were back to the normal routine of 8:00. But if you're new, let me explain very quickly kind of how the show works. First, the show is designed to be interactive. So if you're listening on the podcast, so the episode gets released on the podcast the day after it's recorded. It's a live stream. So if you're listening on the podcast, check out the live stream again Wednesday nights at 8:00, because the show is designed, it's crafted, it intends to be interactive. So you, the audience, we're live. You're more than welcome. In fact, we encourage you to interact. A few minutes ago, Creighton explained how to do that. Just drop your feedback in the comments section, whether you're watching on Facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw or our YouTube channel, outlawradio.live. The show is designed to be interactive. So if the Lord puts a question on your mind about the topic we're discussing and presses something of value, if there's something you want to share, question, comment, feedback, etc., Creighton will be monitoring the comment section. We'd love to include that. The show is also designed to be a conversation. That's why Derek and Justin and Creighton are here in the studio. And so we're going to have a conversational Bible study, again, between a group of friends, misfits transformed by God's grace. But mainly what makes the Outlaw Radio Show unique, yes, it's a Bible study, but it is an unscripted Bible study. This takes me way outside of my comfort zone. So if you've ever gone to Calvary 316 or heard me preach, I am scripted, completely scripted. I type out my Bible studies in full, but this is not that. In fact, when I say unscripted, I have no idea what the topic is that we're going to be talking about tonight. The only person that knows is Creighton. And so in a few minutes, Creighton will introduce the topic. And at that point, it was my job to turn it into a Bible study with these guys' help. Before we get to that, a couple things I do want to just throw out there. Tomorrow is it's kind of an important day in American culture. It is what we call Veterans Day. So it is a day that we kind of societally set aside to recognize and honor all of the men and women who've put on the uniform, all of the men and women that have served our country in the armed forces, whatever the branch happens to be. And I just want to say we have several friends that are in the military. We have several friends that have served. And whether you're active or retired, we just want to say thank you so much for your service. Because of what you've done, you've enabled our freedom. You have served to protect our ability to freely talk about Jesus and to share the love of Jesus, to be a witness of Jesus. And that's such a powerful thing. And freedom's beyond just religious freedoms, the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, the freedom to bear arms, You and your service and sacrifice have enabled our lives to be able to be lived in such a manner. And so, again, if you've served or are serving, thank you so much for what you've done. We love you. We're thankful of you. We appreciate you. And most importantly, we are praying for you that the Lord would keep you safe and give you wisdom as you do what you do. Before I kind of transition from there, you guys have anything you want to say just about the veterans? Again, I know you guys know folks as well.
Yeah, no, I've had plenty of family that served in multiple branches of whether it be Army, Navy, Marines, everything. So
Coast Guard is part of the Armed Forces.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Space Force.
No, it is a huge blessing to think about everybody who has served. So, no, very thankful for that.
What about you, Justin? You have
same. And then the more I've lived outside the U.S., the more I've come to appreciate that ability for them to protect our freedom. It just become more and more.
You want to talk about just a thankless job too, know, especially in the political climate that we're in. I think, it used to be that the one thing, we live in a melting pot with a lot of different opinions about a lot of different things. The one thing that did always kind of seemed to unify the country was an appreciation for those that would serve, that would wear the uniform. I think it's a shame. Sure, there have been periods of history where society has maybe had issues with certain wars and conflicts and protested those things, but there was still a respect to honor. There was a code, that those that did make the sacrifice would be honored and respected. And it's a shame that we were kind of losing a bit of that, I think, in our culture. And as Christians, I think we should counteract that and just be more than willing to express our gratitude, not just to the veterans, but also to, the fire department and the first line workers and the police and all those that make sacrifices. These are professions where they're not doing it for the paycheck because the pay is not great. It's taxing on their families. A lot of the times you have to move around and you have to be flexible in that. It can be rough on families. Even just the anxiety of having someone in a combat zone and the stress that brings. And for those that have experienced the ultimate loss and losing someone, they don't do this for pay. They do this out of a calling, something that God has called them to do. And so again, for that, so appreciative. Kind of segueing, I do want to point one thing out. And I'm not going to spend too much time, guys, on this, but from a personal standpoint, I want to share that over the last couple weeks in my family, we've had a loss. So years ago, my mom's dad, so my biological grandfather, Lyle Weldon, died when my mom was very young. My mom, I believe, was 10 years old. My aunt was 12. My uncle was 8. My grandmother, as a widow, raised my mom and her siblings until they were off to college. And she moved back to Oregon with my uncle and ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of PJ Heath, who himself happened to be a widower. And they fell in love, and PJ married my grandmother. And again, this was a couple years before I was even born, and provided a wonderful life for my grandmother, loved her, served her, was an example of what a husband was to be, had his own kids from the previous marriage, but kind of adopted my mom, my aunt, my uncle as his own, loved us when we came around, and was just a wonderful man. And he passed away at the age of 98. Nothing in particular, life, everybody dies. And so just lived a full life, exemplary. I can't even say it. Just was a good man and was a veteran, served in World War II, which is amazing. Again, 98 years old, seen a lot of life, had a military funeral, was honored in that regard. Just a good man. One of the things again, it being Veterans Day tomorrow kind of brings him to mind. But he also so he was not a Protestant. He was a Catholic. He was a Roman Catholic, diehard Notre Dame Irish fan. But when I hear Protestants just kind of with a broad brush paint all Catholics into one particular category of being not Christian, I immediately think of PJ and believe that that's nonsense. Now, theologically, there are a lot of things that I probably and did disagree with, but the man loved Jesus and was faithful to his religious convictions. It was not a superficial thing. He was dedicated and committed. And again, just a good man, veteran, and he'll be missed by his family for sure. All that said, Creighton, what is the topic at hand? You drop it. We're going to talk about it. And then, Justin, don't let me forget that by the end of today's episode, we do want to take about 5 minutes and chat a little bit about our Atlanta Braves, because this is an important week. World Series champs. I don't know if I mentioned that. So, Creighton, what are we talking about today?
All right. So on Sunday in your Bible study, you made a comment that I've heard, I don't know, probably 1,000 times growing up in the church. And every time I've ever heard it, I've always had the same thought, and I've never gotten a good, cohesive single thing answer for it. What you said was that the Bible says count it all trials, or count it all joy when you go into trials, and that when we're in trials, there's a good chance that it is, or there's a chance that if it is from Satan, if Satan is trying us, if Satan is attacking us, that is because we're doing something good, and Satan attacks those who do good, which makes sense. And so the question is, does that mean that if you are not being attacked, if you're in a season that is good for an extended period of time, are you not doing good? Should you change something such that Satan deems you worthy of attacking?
Okay, with that question ringing out there, before I share anything at all, I want to throw it to Derek and Justin very quickly, and I want to get you guys' his read on the essence of the question and make sure that we've got this all kind of unpacked as to what we want to discuss tonight. So you heard what Creighton just said. Derek, you first, and then Justin, what's the essence of the topic for tonight?
So obviously, if Satan's trying to attack you, it means you're doing the work of God. Like, you're doing the work for his kingdom, through him, by him, whatever. So obviously he's trying to hinder that and trying to impede on whatever God's trying to do through you. And is that in the essence? So if nothing bad is happening to you in trying to do those things for the Lord, does that mean that, oh, well, I'm not doing anything? Should I do more? Is that in essence what it is?
Exactly.
And I think my immediate answer is well, no. I mean, God's purpose for everyone is different, and God's handle on our lives would subsede whatever he's trying to do. But I do get that, oh, well, does that mean every person needs to constantly go through a trial at some point, or at all the time, if they're doing the work of the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
Justin, what's kind of your interpretation of this question, your insight into what we're going to unpack?
Well, I understand the question and the essence of it, but at the same time, I have some opinions on it.
Well, let's do that. Let's start
here for.
Right. Well, I know I didn't know if you wanted to go right.
No,
off the bat,
let's dive into it before I get into the topic
the,
itself. Let's share
the
thoughts.
way I look at it is I think that's a very I don't want to say narrow-minded, but kind of a fine line between if you're not being attacked, or if you're being attacked, it's Satan, to if you're being attacked or you're having a bad time, maybe you're just doing stupid stuff, or maybe it's just bad stuff happening. And it's not always going to be a devil underneath every rock or bad thing. And I think that's where a lot of people start going to when you start getting into this.
Yeah.
every bad thing that happens to me.
I
is
keep doing
Satan.
drugs and bad things are happening to me. God, why is
Right.
this happening to me?
It's
Why
the
am I being
devil.
persecuted?
Yeah. But at the same
Like,
time,
what?
but at the same time, that good battle strategy of Satan in essence is if I'm doing something to hurt his kingdom, he's gonna attack. He's not just gonna stand by and let that happen. So
Right.
And how much you nitpick too. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm reading my Bible every morning, and every morning somebody comes up to the door and knocks. Is this Satan trying to distract me from reading my Bible? Like, you know,
kind of like that meme that's like there's a storm, Satan whisper or whatever, the storm's coming, and I whisper back,
Yeah.
I am the storm.
Yeah.
I hate
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
I hate that kind of
Or
stuff
it's
so
like
much.
that one guy, he's like, Lord, why do you give me your hardest battles? And he was like,
Yeah, that-
you ate a 12-pack of tacos from Taco Bell. It's like, so sometimes it's on us, but yeah, where do you draw that line? That
Right.
makes
And I
sense.
totally understand what you mean, Justin, about like not all, I misspoke at the beginning. Not all trials are Satan. Some trials that I've had are because of Creighton and because Creighton is dumb.
No, that's not what I was saying that you said. I was saying that I think there's a fine line where some people take it
Yeah.
that extra step too far
Right. Yeah.
from hearing I'm doing stuff so Satan's attacking me to I'm just being stupid.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
more often than not the case. And at least in my life.
Yeah. So that comes to, are you doing God's work or not?
Well, it's good that one meme is a good example of
Yeah.
that. Why are you giving me your hardest battles? He's like, you just ate 12 tacos.
Yeah.
It's not
Right.
That's
it's
on
that-
you.
That's on you kind of thing.
No, yeah, I get the gist of the question.
So the heart of the question, because I'm trying to think of like which direction to start with,
Mhm.
is, I guess let's go with the most simplistic component to it. If you're not being attacked, is that the evidence that you're somehow not doing the right thing? 'Cause
Yes.
Satan only attacks those in whom he's threatened by. So if you're not being attacked, is that somehow the evidence that maybe you're not doing the right thing?
How do you define being attacked?
See, that's
and
great.
just having a bad
Mhm.
time?
That's great. And I would probably start there. Like, let's define being attacked, and then unpack the question itself. Spiritual warfare, we know from not just one passage of scripture, but really the overarching story arc of the Bible. There is a very real enemy, an enemy against God and an enemy against the people of God. There is a very real opposition, not just Satan, but his cohorts of fallen angels and demons. Paul in Ephesians 6 lists principalities and powers, the darkness of this age. What all those things are, who knows, exactly the particulars. But there are evil forces in our world, antithetical to the things of God and active against the people of God. And so there is such a thing as spiritual warfare. The Bible, again, we're not cherry picking one passage of scripture. There's again, it's consistent throughout the story arc of the Bible. Jesus was very transparent. This past Sunday, we're working our way through the Beatitudes. And Jesus, after listing out all these characteristics that his disciples are supposed to emulate, the Beatitudes, not the do-attitudes, not things we're to do, he says, blessed are the peacemakers or the peaceable. And then he immediately segues into blessed are the persecuted. And Jesus, very unique to him as a religious leader, when Muhammad, started his movement, it was a rallying cry of victory and domination. But Jesus, his rallying cry was persecution, opposition. He says, if they persecute me, don't have any expectation that they're not going to persecute you as well. And we understand that the attacks of the enemy come in all different shapes and sizes. Satan can attack us personally, individually, on a spiritual plane. It's been mentioned already, but we can be attacked through temptation, the enticement to do wrong, to do evil, to act contrary to the will and purposes of God in our lives. So temptation exists. Trial. There are, storms in the Bible are often allegories for, the spiritual realm. There are two different kinds of storms we find in Scripture, and I think this is a great caveat to what Justin was sharing. There are what I would call storms of disobedience. So these are storms where we find ourselves in the middle of a very difficult trial, mainly because we were stupid. Like it's a trial allowed by God, but maybe not necessarily promoted by the enemy, but just brought on by our stupidity. A great example of one of those types of trials would be Jonah. Jonah found himself in a storm on the Mediterranean Sea for only one reason. He was running from the will and purposes of God for his life, to the point that the ship is going to go down, and he acknowledges this. And he's like, hey, the only remedy is you got to throw me overboard. I'm the one bringing the ship down because I'm in rebellion against God. He's not saying this is the enemy. No, this is my stupidity. So he finds himself in the water. He's in a trial, but it's a trial of his own making.
So redirection versus a genuine like temptation or storm.
It's a correction.
Yeah, correction.
It's a correction. It's a storm that's allowed for disciplinary reasons. Sometimes you do this in child raising, in rearing children. You see that, okay, your kid is not doing well in school. You keep harping on them about their grades. You keep stressing the importance of the homework. They're not getting the message. And so ultimately you allow what? The failing grade. Knowing that there's consequences. You got to redo the class, or you have to stay for extra work. You allow them a hardship intentionally for the purposes of correction. Again, it's not the enemy. It's not the attack of the enemy. It's kind of you shot yourself in the foot. Don't blame the enemy. Don't blame the army across the field when you shot yourself. This was you shooting yourself. But there are also biblically what we would call storms of obedience. Great example of this is the disciples. When Jesus tells them to get into the boat to go across the sea, I'll meet you on the other side. They do. They get in the boat. They're making their way across the Sea of Galilee, and there's a mighty tempest. There's a storm. They're in the storm not because they were being disobedient to God. In fact, they're in the storm for the very reason that they were being obedient to what Jesus had told them to do. It was not their fault. They have these headwinds that are against them, and we're told that the word tempest, seismos, indicates that there might have been a demonic element to it, that the storm of obedience, that God allowed the enemy to attack them for larger purposes, because ultimately Jesus would walk across the water. And you have this famous scene where, they think it's a ghost. They freak out. They recognize it's the Lord. Peter says, hey, I'd like to come walking with you. Jesus is like, come on. And he took a couple steps and then got his eyes off of Jesus, started to sink. And a wonderful lesson, the storm of obedience enabled God to teach them a very important lesson. Again, it was not one of disobedience. It was not one of correction, but of growth. Sometimes we have to go through stretching seasons, sometimes difficulties. So there are all kinds of different attacks. I will take one step backwards. And this gets to kind of the essence of your question, Creighton. We had this story in the Old Testament. It's a big book. It's long. I don't know how many people do a lot of devotions in the book of Job. We don't really even know when the book of Job was written. There seems to be some evidence that Job might have lived prior to Noah's flood. We really have no definitive idea. We do know that it is likely the oldest book in the Bible, that it was compiled, written before Moses compiled Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Very important book. If it is, therefore, the first book, God's first revelation to man, it's fascinating in the subject matter, because the subject matter of Job deals with this particular issue. Job, if you've never read the book of Job, opens in the heavenly realm. So Job was a righteous man. He was a good man. He was a man doing the right things, a man that loved God, a man that served God, a man that had a wife and a family and a career and a job and servants, and he was doing all of the right things. And God knew what was going on in Job's life, and so did the enemy, so did Satan. And so the first 2 chapters, we get this glimpse into the heavenly realm where the enemy, Satan, is in the throne room of God. God is pointing out the righteousness of this man, Job. And what does Satan say? Satan makes the comment that Job is living this blessed life. Why? Because there's not any opposition. Now, we know that anything that comes into our lives, like Satan doesn't operate freely. He is a created being. He is a being in dominion. He's under authority. Specifically, he's under the authority of God. Satan cannot operate in this world without the permission of God, which is very then interesting in regards to this whole particular topic, because if you have Job and he is declared righteous, blessed, Satan comes and says, hey, the reason for this in his positive attitude is because there hasn't been opposition. Doesn't that give us some insight into the question? Because was Job doing the wrong thing and that was why he wasn't being attacked?
No, because then Satan wouldn't have gone to
Correct.
Wouldn't have gone to God to be Satan.
So the short end answer to your question is Job tells us that just because your life isn't experiencing opposition, just because you aren't being necessarily tempted, although I think we're always tempted, just because there's not like some tangible evidence of the opposition or attack of the enemy, isn't necessarily to be viewed as the evidence that you are not living the right way, that you're not a threat.
Could just be a season of calm, season of peace.
Exactly.
Like I said, we have 4 different seasons in the year for a reason. I mean, we have different seasons in our life of, seasons of rest or seasons of struggle. Like it is what it is.
And it's been said that everyone, in regards to a storm, everybody has 3 perspectives of storms. Everyone is in blue skies, and there's a storm ahead. Whether they can see it or not, there is one. It's inevitable. We're told, count it all joy when you face trials of many kind, knowing that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance, endurance. And James writes about this very eloquently. So there is blue skies with a storm somewhere in the horizon in our future. That's true. And then there are those that are in a storm, and storms are very disorienting. If you've ever experienced, again, difficulties, whether it's a storm of obedience or one of disobedience, it stretches our faith. It causes a greater resilience and dependency on the Lord. You want Jesus in the boat during storms. And then the third perspective is that, there are people that are exiting storms and there are blue skies ahead. Everyone's in one of those categories. Like everyone watching or listening, you're either in a wonderful season of life, and at some point in the future, there's a hardship coming, or you're in the hardship and there it doesn't feel like there's an end in sight, or you're at the tail end of the storm and the clouds are beginning to clear. Hope is beginning to stir. Good things are ahead. Back to the question, Job is a great example of how the lack of opposition shouldn't be seen as the evidence that you're doing something wrong. Job is the example, quite the opposite. It doesn't negate the fact that Satan does only attack those in whom he's threatened by, because Job is then also a great example of that, because he's a guy.
He gets a little attacked.
Right. He's the guy making headway. He's the guy that Satan feels compelled to bring to God's attention, and then his story gets very difficult. Job's story begins in blue skies, it descends into a storm, and then it ends with a clearing. Again, a great example. Fascinating. God's first story to man, God's first communication to humanity if Job is the first book of the Bible, is the acknowledgement of this particular reality, a reality that no one can escape. To me, I think the statement he only attacks those in whom he's threatened by intends to provide meaning and purpose in the person being attacked. Because when you're in the midst of that attack of the enemy, whatever that happens to look like, whether it's an incredible time of temptation, whether it's opposition that really challenges the bedrock of one faith, whether it's just difficulty and hardship and just some of the trials of just living in a fallen place, or it's the active persecution that you are on the other side of the firing line. Whatever the attack or the motivation for the person experiencing it, that is evidence that the enemy finds whatever's happening in your life to be a threat. You know, a great book that illustrates this, and Justin, I know you can speak to this. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Screwtape Letters.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, matter of fact, Justin, you want to kind of throw out the premise of the book? You're a big C.S. Lewis fan.
I am. I guess the premise of it, you got to think of Satan and his cohorts as a business per se, with each demon or fallen angel, I guess you could say, in different tiers of management. And so the whole premise of the book is this higher level demon is writing to his nephew, a lower level demon,
Screwtape and Wormwood.
Yeah, who's in charge of a human, and
he's been assigned to
one person whose his job is to tempt him and to keep him away from Christ. And then I don't want to give away the book if you've never.
The book's been out for like 70 years, so we're way beyond spoiler alerts.
The whole thing is it's from the perspective. Temptations from the perspective of a demon or the fallen angel,
of the tempter,
and how they interact with those who are not marked by Christ, and then those who afterwards are marked by Christ. Where does that dynamic change happen? I guess is a good way to put it.
But what the book does, and again, it's a fictional story written by C.S. Lewis. Right.
Yeah.
You know, C.S. Lewis was pressed by his publisher to write a second book. And he refused, would not do it. And his justification was that he had to go into such a dark place to imagine, to conceive of how demons, how the enemy craft their attacks.
Well, I think it's because when you become a Christian, like, you're born again, you're a new creation. So for you to imagine these evil acts is just,
it's antithetical to your person.
It is.
Yeah. So he was like, no, I won't do it. Like, he refused to write a second book. At the very end of his life, though, he wrote kind of an amendment, for lack of a better way. What would you call it? A prologue? Epilogue. Prologue's beginning, right? Yep. Epilogue. Called Screwtape Proposes a Toast. So, and a lot of the newer copies or editions of the Screwtape Letters, it's actually included. Earlier copies, it's not, because it wasn't written. But he wrote it at the end of his life, and Screwtape Proposes a Toast. His nephew's finally graduating, and so he kind of stands up to do a toast. And so it's like 15 extra pages. But again, just a very dark place. So I guess getting back to your question, Creighton, because you're the one introducing the topic. If you are getting applicational here, if you're in like a good spot in life, man, and you're like, like, things are good. Like, I'm working, God's blessing, my life is fruitful. I really don't have storms. There's no storm clouds. Like life is really good right now. That's great. Like, don't think, oh, well, maybe I'm on the wrong side of the war here, and so my life isn't miserable because I'm doing something wrong, and thus Satan isn't threatened by me, and you get in your head in that regard. Oh yeah, don't do that, because, man, enjoy it. Like, enjoy Enjoy the good season. And here's why. It won't last.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. Like, I'm 38 years old. Doesn't mean I've lived a lot of life, but I've lived some life at this point. And I look back, and there are very defined times of terrible storms. Some of my own making, some not. Some where I was completely at the mercy. That's the thing about the weather. You're at the mercy of the weather. You can't control the weather. It happens. And you are along for the ride. And in regards to our spiritual life, I think that when it comes to some of the spiritual forces, because God allows these things. God is in control just as God is in control of the weather, God is in control of the weather of our spiritual life. And some years, man, we have longer springs and deeper summers and more fruitful harvests. And the winters aren't that bad. In fact, it never really got that cold, and we only had 1 or 2 freezes, and it was semi-enjoyable. It wasn't bad. Now, there are other years where the spring is short, the summer is brutal, the fall is shorter, and the winter comes with a vengeance, And that's just the year it happened to be. And the same thing is within the spiritual life. Kind of follows the same pattern. Like, if you are in a good year, enjoy it, man. Be blessed by it. Grow in it. Be a good chipmunk and store up some stuff.
Right.
Hold on to some of that, because inevitably it doesn't last forever. There will be a time where there will be a trial, an attack, the opposition, a storm. And you don't know how long it'll last, but I can promise you it won't last forever. And that's the thing about the way this works. There is something redeeming about it. God allowed it, so he has a purpose behind it. The enemy is wanting, yes, to steal, kill, and destroy, but the Lord is wanting to strengthen and grow and deepen. All the things that Satan means for our harm, God can turn those things and use them for good. Doesn't make it easy. Still very difficult and hard, but there's a redemption to it. And so if you're in that season where life is good, man, ride it. And if you're in the season where life is not very good, where you're like, man, I am oppressed. I'm in a funk. I'm in a cloud. I've sensed an opposition. Even if it's not something like very tangible, but you can sense it spiritually. It's okay. Like, remember, God has allowed this. These are natural seasons. They don't last forever. And God is wanting to use this for his purposes in your life. Now, it's true, Satan wants to use them for his purposes, but keep your eyes on Jesus. Don't allow that. So if you're in a good season, enjoy it. And if you're in a trial, endure it. Both are allowed by God. We shouldn't overlook either of them as somehow being indicative of we're being punished or not. Remember that because of Jesus and his work on the cross, you have been made righteous before God. And that is a permanent state that cannot be taken from you, which I find to be encouraging. So great. Kind of getting to like that kind of the angle that the thought that answer your question before I throw it to these guys over here.
Yeah, it really did. That's one of the things that I been thinking about since Sunday, because I am in a pretty good spot right now, and I have been for a little while. And I was like, well, and because anxiety is one of those things that doesn't let you think straight, I never would have thought of Job while in my anxiety bubble. So it's great to have someone be like, hey man, you remember that thing? You're good. I really appreciate that.
Let me give you kind of the anti-Job. This is just, as you were talking, just a thought that came to me. Saul of Tarsus, lived a wonderful life. We don't know a lot about his life. He says he was a Hebrew of the Hebrews. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He studied at the feet of Gamaliel, who was one of the foremost scholars of the day. Being a Pharisee means he's one of the 70 most powerful men in Israel. We can extrapolate that he was married, that he was young, that he was wealthy. I'm convinced that he was likely the rich young ruler. Another story for another day. rich, young, and he was a ruler. Life was great for Saul of Tarsus. He had power, he had prestige, he had notoriety. There was no opposition to Saul's life at all. Was that the indication he was doing the right thing?
Obviously not.
Obviously not. And then on his way to Damascus, a bright light shines, who's known as the light of the world. And he says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And it's Jesus. It's hard to kick against the goads. And in that moment, Saul's life changed forever. Did his life become easier?
Oh, certainly not.
No, it became way more difficult. But was it more rewarding?
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. So my point is that, like, here you have a guy that's doing well, that's blessed, not the evidence that he's right or that he's where he should be. So my point is that, like, kind of inverting your thought is that if your life is like great right now, that might not be the indication that God's pleased with you either.
That's true.
Like, just because there is an opposition and just because you're not being resisted doesn't mean and shouldn't be seen as the evidence that there's not something terribly wrong. Again, that kind of goes both ways, which I think is interesting. Guys, what are your thoughts?
I had it was a quick thought. I was thinking back to the taco thing. And
you got your mind stuck on those tacos early on.
Yeah, but this is kind of a different thought. I was like, back to what we were talking about. What is a storm? Like, as a society, I feel that we're more inclined to be comfortable. So at the slightest bit of inconvenience, we think of it as persecution or a storm, and that could be anything. But to really seek out, like, okay, is this of God? I mean, God's in control. Like, no matter what it is, too, like, regardless of what the storm is. But looking at, like, something so minor of, like, oh, this person cut me off. Why do I have to deal with this? And, like, just sorting out, is this really a storm or is it not? I think that's what I'm really trying to get to. Like, is it actual persecution or is it just you're so comfortable now? You don't know the difference.
You know, comfort is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Not, and let me add a caveat. There are some pastors that will say, you know, God doesn't want you to be comfortable. Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I don't necessarily see any biblical evidence to say that comfort in and of itself is a bad thing.
Yeah, we literally have a day of rest for that purpose.
For comfort.
Yeah.
That being said, comfort, what makes it dangerous is it can very quickly lead to apathy and complacency. When you are under like a measure of assault, life is a little more real. You're a little bit more aware. Subsequently, you recognize I've got to be dependent. You know, it's in times of difficulty that you'll see your prayer life becomes more passionate, more frequent. You're a little bit more apt to be at church because, man, I desperately need this right now. Your time in God's word is more dedicated, more frequent. You know, sometimes when we are removed from comfort, good things result. Like, the spiritual world is more real. When life is good, the danger of comfort can be complacency, that we let down our guard. That's what I would caution. And that's why I think that God allows these seasons for a reason. I would say for the Christian, this is just kind of building. I think the good seasons are often the most dangerous for a Christian than the bad ones.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why, but while you were talking about that, it occurred to me the conversation we had at the beginning of COVID, where we were talking about the church going through a rough season and it making the church stronger. It's the same idea. The church gets soft and it fills up with people who aren't necessarily really in it.
But speak to your own life.
Yeah.
Like, because you just said, so the reason that we have this topic is because we went through this beatitude on Sunday about the persecuted. I made this statement, Satan only attacks those in whom he's threatened by. And your anxiety got pricked about, I'm in a great season. Is this the evidence that, like, that was the essence, the motivation of the question.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, you're in this great season. Do you find yourself maybe slipping into some apathy? What should you do to safeguard against that? You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to kind of throw it your direction because you're in this particular season. Is that more dangerous?
It's absolutely more dangerous. I think that one of the things you can do is have a Bible study with your pastor on Wednesday nights. So shameless plug for Outlaw Radio.
8 p.m. Wednesday nights.
But yeah, it absolutely is. I know that one of the things that helps is that I have to be at church on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, you have to. Like, there's not. We don't. You have no options.
Right. And so I don't have the opportunity. I don't have the
part of your
opportunity to
parole, I think, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
yeah,
what
my parole.
what we worked out with
I'm
the
not
state?
on parole.
with Jesus.
Also,
What
if
we
I
worked
would,
out
if
with
I
the
would be on
state.
parole, it'd be federal. I go big.
Go big or go home.
But like being on church on Sundays is big. I try to do things during the week like this and whatnot. But I do agree with you that it is a dangerous place to be, which is probably why my anxiety was pricked in the first place, because I recognize that.
Interesting. Justin, what are your thoughts, man? You've been quiet for a few minutes.
Just letting everybody get their thoughts out.
All right. Now you're
I try
you're
not to
bringing it.
think too much. I'm glad you went with Job as an example, and I think another opposite. And you don't go into a lot of detail in the book of Job. Job's wife, she lost her children.
She
at the
seems
same
like a
time.
real jewel.
Well, you got to think she had completely different reaction to the same things were happening to her. She lost all her children. She lost her house. She lost all this. She was in the same place as Job. Why did she chose different reaction than Job did? Job chose to say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord,"
And she said, "Curse God and die."
curse God and die.
Right.
And so you have two different reactions here when you come bad times and good times. And I think our reactions as Christians should be the same thing. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
Whether we're in, I like that song, blessed be the name of the Lord, or I forgot who sings it. Yeah. Or famine or feast, I'm down on my knees. That one, I forgot who sings that, but blessed be the name of the Lord should be our reaction, because in the end, our 80 years on average time here in this world is nothing compared to what's going to happen for all eternity.
Yeah, it's not ours anyway. Like the Lord gives and the Lord takes.
Right.
Too,
Okay. So I was going to get to that. One of the interesting things is, so at Calvary 316, I'm involved with the worship team. I play bass, but I also play guitar. And a lot of times I'm the one crafting the set. My point is I'm typically on stage during worship. And I always have this thought that hits me sometimes when we pick songs to sing, and, the congregation just is singing along with these songs, voicing the words to these songs. And I often sit there thinking, like, do you really know what you're singing?
Yeah.
Like the blessed be the name of the Lord. You give and take away.
Right.
Yeah.
You give and take away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, most of us have the reaction of Job's wife, not Job.
Right. And that's where I'm, even when my life sucks, I was doing good in China. Yeah, I was on vacation. Half my stuff is still in China because they wouldn't ship it to me, because I was on vacation in another country when they locked down the thing.
Remember that song? Holy fire, burn away. My desire for anything.
And you know what? I could have freaked out, and I'm not saying like it sucks. My Xbox is in a different place.
It's in a communist country.
Right. It was great. I love being there. I was able to travel all over the world and stuff like that. And it sucked being stuck away from there without me choosing to leave. But at the same time, I had to just sit back and be like, you know what? Blessed be the name of the Lord. Where are you taking me next?
Yeah.
And I think I have to sit back, and instead of sitting there saying, woe is me, I have to sit back and just say, you're in control. Blessed be your name. Yeah. And I think that's a chosen thing whether I'm being attacked or in a state of nothingness or in a state of bliss.
This is where I think, not to get too theologically heavy, this is where I think the church over the centuries has made just that tragic error of the pendulum swinging to polar opposites. You have like the Armenian ideal of it's all free will, right? And thus all free will means that all storms are you're making. They're either the evidence that you're doing the right thing or they're the evidence that you're doing the wrong thing, because it's, God is not in control. This is the byproduct of your decisions, your will, your choice. But then on the flip side, we have like complete God sovereignty, no inclusion of human will and action. And it's like the opposite. Like, well, everything that, it's all this cosmic thing, when that's not necessarily, like, you're just being stupid. You're the moron.
Yeah.
Don't blame God for this trial. This is just you being an idiot. Which I think is fascinating. Like theology matters.
Mm-hmm.
And how you get into the nitty-gritty of life and the changing of seasons is again, I think kind of relevant to it. You guys have any other thoughts before we close with just a couple minutes of Braves talk?
I think one more thought on being stupid. Balaam.
Balaam's a really good one.
All he could do was bless the children of God. He couldn't curse them. I think that's a good example of being.
Balaam should be a topic in and of itself.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Balaam's pastor was a jackass.
Right.
Which is the pastor of Calvary 316. So, Justin, you asked me an interesting question about
Freddie Freeman,
the Atlanta Braves. And this is the Outlaw Radio Show. This is an unscripted Bible study. But this is, guys,
we need
real talk.
As Braves fans, we need to pray for Freddie Freeman.
One of the reasons that we pulled this joker off of the radio is so that we could do whatever we want. So if you have no interest in the Atlanta Braves, you can turn off the podcast. You can just turn off this, before we do this. Any comments, anything online, Creighton?
No, not.
Any critiques, any positives about the mustache?
Yeah, well,
I haven't gotten any. No, did somebody text you? Did somebody text you a comment?
Not about the mustache, but my wife had a good nickname for Justin.
Oh, hold on. No.
Whoa.
I've told your wife many times that we don't take comments.
It's Jammin' Justin.
Oh my gosh.
Honeycomb Holcomb.
That's too much.
It is a lot.
That's a mouthful.
So much.
Honeycomb's a good one.
Honeycomb.
Yeah.
Honeycomb.
Jammin'. No, I like
No, I don't like
honeycomb better. It's like, big and sweet, like a honeycomb. It makes sense.
I think big and sweet might be a good thing.
BS, what's up, bro?
Big and sweet.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're still going to have to work on a good nickname for Justin. Derek has not come up with any. His wife had to pitch him one.
I've been busy describing like sin.
Okay, yeah.
Like
Thanks for that.
You know what? Even if I don't get a nickname, blessed be the name of the Lord.
Okay,
Yeah.
Freddie Freeman. Let's close it out with a little Freddie Freeman talk. So if you're outside of the Atlanta market, our all-star first baseman, Freddie Freeman, he's 32 years old. He's been with the Braves since he was 17 years old and drafted in the second round. Came up to the team when we were good. He spent 6 years during the rebuild, but stayed with the team. Wanted to be part of that. Has been rewarded by seeing our meteoric rise, and now he's a world champion. He's 32. He's had a good contract, deferred some money. He's had one contract coming off of his minor league deal. But now Freddie Freeman's a free agent, and we've known this was going to happen for 2 years. Freddie Freeman from day one has been like, I want to be a Brave for life, like Chipper Jones. And the Braves have been like, we want Freddie to be a Brave for life, like Chipper Jones. First, being with one team for the duration of your career doesn't happen often. Like there are very few instances of that happening. Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera. I mean, there are some, but baseball's a business, and the longevity with one club isn't the norm within the business. Even the famous Dale Murphy, didn't finish his career with the Braves. He ended up with the Phillies. Hank Aaron, they let go of Hank Aaron. He went back to Milwaukee for a year, maybe two. So it's an abnormal thing to spend your entire career, because there reaches a point where the franchise is just not willing to put the money behind what will be a fading talent. Now, Freddie Freeman won a World Series. He's 32 years old. He's going to want 6 years, and he's going to want somewhere around $200 million. That's the reality of it. He's a free agent, which means the Angels, the Dodgers, the Rangers, the Yankees, there are other teams with massive payrolls that will be able to offer Freddie Freeman the number of years and the amount of money that he wants. Now, the question is, should the Braves, or will the Braves, match the offer, or at least come close enough to the offer whereby Freddie can make the decision, you know what, I really do want to be a Brave for life, and I'm willing to put my money on the table to do it. I say he doesn't, and I say the Braves shouldn't, and I'll give you a perfect example of it.
Okay, so you're asking if the Braves should do that?
And I don't think they should. And here's why. I love Freddie Freeman. And yes, I have a jersey with Freddie Freeman on the back of it. I have more jerseys with the Atlanta Braves on the front of it. There was a time, a long time, that I was a Braves fan. Freddie Freeman was not on the Braves. And there will be a lot more of my life where Freddie Freeman will be not on the Braves, regardless of whatever happens with this contract. I'm a Braves fan first and foremost. I love the fact that we got a World Series. It was unexpected. We probably shouldn't have, but that's baseball. I bring up, and here's my example, Justin, because you're giving me that look. You're giving me that look. I care more about the Braves than I care about having Freddie Freeman on the Braves. I care more about us being competitive next year and in the years to come than I care about having Freddie Freeman on the Braves and us being a borderline playoff team, because of the payroll constraints that such a large contract will yield to a team that is salary strapped. I'll give you an example. It's a perfect example. The St. Louis Cardinals won a World Series, and they won a World Series with a first baseman that had been with their franchise since he was like 16 years old, that they drafted. He was a surefire Hall of Famer. His name's Albert Pujols. Won a World Series. Albert Pujols was due for a mega contract. The Angels came in and offered him a number that was crazy, and the Cardinals were like, no, thank you. This was their franchise player, first ballot Hall of Famer. He had a statue out front. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to do it. The money doesn't make sense. The number of years doesn't make sense. This is a business. They made a terrible, difficult, had to have been a gut-wrenching decision for their fans, because they all had Albert Pujols jerseys that now he's an Angel. Had to have been terrible. I remember when it happened thinking, that stinks. What happened? Over the next couple of years, the Cardinals won 2 more World Series without Albert Pujols. You know how many Albert Pujols has won with the Angels? 0. You know how many times he's been to the playoffs with the Angels? I think 0. Baseball's a business. You've got to detach yourself. You have to detach yourself from the emotion.
I understand that. But today's world, you have franchise players that people go to see at the stadiums. Also, Marcell Ozuna, if we get rid of him, and the Braves already said they're going to increase the payroll. So if those two things happen, there's going to be some free space there. And I think Freddie's good enough to last at least 2-3 more years.
Okay, 2 or 3 more years. And if he puts up MVP numbers for 2 or 3 more years, then I'm okay with the Braves eating the last 3 years of the deal. But that's a big if. He'll be 33, 34. He plays every game. He's stubborn that way. He doesn't like being out of the lineup. I think that there's a longevity concern. If the Braves have the window to really do something, and if Freddie was willing to take 4 years, even 5 years at 180, 150, a Paul Goldschmidt style deal, I say you do that even if you know you have to eat the money. By either San Diego, and his wife is more interested in being, the true baseball wives of Los Angeles. It gets trouble. Like, this is not all Freddie Freeman's decision. He's from California. I think he's going to go back to California. Anyway, I love Freddie. Thank you for the World Series. We'll love you forever. But the business is the business. And here's the thing. We'll close with this. If the Braves didn't win the World Series and Alex Anthopoulos, our general manager, makes the decision to let Freddie walk, he gets roasted. Like absolutely roasted. What Alex Anthopoulos did since the trade deadline, bringing a world championship to the Braves the first time in 26 years, and it was clear that we won the World Series because of the moves that man made. Okay? That guy has if there was ever a time that he had enough capital, and the fan base will be ticked off, but he has enough capital with the fan base that you can't help but take a step back and say, you know what? You got us the world championship, and I'll give you a year or two to see how this plays out.
I can see what you're saying happening.
I'm making a compelling case.
I'm not liking it, but I can see it happening.
I'm just saying. One player doesn't win you a championship, but one player with a terrible payroll can keep you from a world championship for years. Ask the Angels. There's a whole long list of teams, that prove the point. So anyway, Creighton, you got anything? Any parting words?
Oh, I'm awake. All right.
Oh my goodness gracious.
All right, y'all.
Maybe we should talk about Pokemon next time. He'll stay.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And then I die. Anything?
No. Baseball. Yay.
Oh my goodness gracious. Well, listen, you've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. Derek, Justin, thank you for joining me. Creighton, thank you for being here. Once again, my name is Zach Adams. I hope you join us this time next week for another episode of the Outlaw Radio Show.